Hi, and thanks for joining us this afternoon for Anne Lister Gateway to Research on Anne Lister's 230th birthday. I'm Sarah from Calderdale Libraries, and very shortly I'm going to be joined by some of the fantastic researchers from the research project and website Packed with Potential. But first, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context. So, over the last few years, there's been lots of research published through books and articles and so on by the likes of Helena Whitbread and Jill Liddington. But in order to do research into Anne Lister, you had to go into Central Library and Archives and view the diaries on microfilm. But with the launch of Gentleman Jack, what West Yorkshire Archives, who look after the diaries, did is they made high quality digital scans of the diaries available on their website and catalogue. So theoretically, wherever you were in the world, you could go onto their online catalogue and read Anne Lister's diaries. However, there's over 5 million words. Part of them are in code, and also, probably most importantly, Anne Lister's handwriting is really, really difficult to read. So it's actually not that easy or straightforward. So what they also did at the same time is launch an epic transcription project where lots and lots of volunteers transcribed parts of Anne Lister's diaries. So some of Packed with Potential are involved in the West Yorkshire Archive transcription project, but not all of them are. And what really interested me with this group of people is they've taken Anne Lister research to a whole other level and really gone down different avenues of research and got involved in research that they never really imagined they would have done before. So what I'll do is let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they've been up to and who they are.
Okay, so hi. My name is Marlene Oliveira. I'm from Portugal and I'm a code breaker, which means I transcribe Anne Lister's journals. I've been with the project maybe since July or late June or early July 2019, and I've been with Packed with Potential since the start. So my work as an independent researcher started after Anne Lister came into my life, and I contribute with articles, general research, help with trackers, and do some maintenance on the side.
Okay, Amanda.
Hello, my name is Amanda Price. I'm based in Cambridgeshire in the UK. I'm also a transcriber of Anne Lister's diaries, and I got involved with that, I think, February last year, and that's ongoing. I got involved with Packed with Potential by creating a timeline of Anne Lister's life, just as a way to sort of contextualize all of the information that's available on her, so it's a little bit more understandable. And also through developing travel maps, which are all now on Packed with Potential. And I've also contributed with articles and research and some of the trackers too.
Okay, thank you. Pauline?
Hi, I'm Pauline. I'm from France. I'm not a code breaker, but I'm doing research since November 2019, mostly for Packed with Potential, and I'm helping with research mostly.
Brilliant. And Jude?
Hi, I'm Jude Dobson, and I live in Halifax, well, North Halifax. So I'm quite close to Halifax Library and the archive here, which I've been to quite a few times. I'm not a code breaker. I did try getting involved, and I found the so I think I got halfway through and kind of things on the sideline, if you like, because I like being the feet on the ground, going to the archive and the library to try and pick out resources and discuss those with people from Packed with Potential. So I kind of contribute that way, really. I've also got plans to share things about my research into Eliza Reign and Marion Lister. So I would like, with the help of Packed with Potential people, to you know, set something up in terms of the timeline, for instance. I'm still information gathering, really, even though I've been at it quite a while now. But obviously it's a bit frustrating with the pandemic, because there's places that I had planned to go and I've had to put off. But obviously, hopefully that's going to start picking up towards the summertime here.
Thank you. One thing I'm really interested in is, yeah, like Anne Lister as being like a gateway to research and bringing in people that maybe haven't done research before. And am I right in thinking that none of you are like professional researchers, none of you are librarians or archivists? So I just wondered if you could very briefly tell me, like, what made you really want to get involved in researching, and like what's your experience been of using libraries and archives, both like in life and digitally? So should we go around the same order? Start with Marlene.
Okay, so before Anne Lister, I had sworn to myself that I would not delve into research at an academic level or otherwise for 10 years, because I had finished my master's and I made it like 40 years until she barreled in. But then it started with a question, and oddly enough, it wasn't about Anne Lister, it was about Anne Walker. We wanted to know why a person sounded so together and in control, even though she had her good days and bad days and good months and bad months. Why had she been deemed insane, which is not the ideal description, but it's the one that is mostly commonly used. So we started to dig, and we started to make connections, and Jude got involved very early on because we asked for help to have someone with acting as our boots on the ground, and we started to compile references. And at some point, the picture emerged to us that things were not as simple as they looked. And then we sort of branched out, and more and more content came on. We investigated stuff about Anne Lister's troubles in the Pyrenees. We did an article about the Paris apartments. And now we have several projects ongoing, and probably the biggest one right now is the one about the location of Anne Lister's grave. But before Anne Lister, I always liked libraries, and I visited libraries on occasion, depending on what I needed, either for normal reading for leisure or for academic studies. For example, sometimes there's material that is not accessible from home, so I needed to go to the university and use the local resources to access papers and other stuff like that, or books specialized in my training. I'm not a historian not necessarily by trade, but my studies are in computer science, so this is completely out there. But a lot of the skills, the research skills, are transferable, thankfully, so those serve me very well. But the first time I set foot on an archive was because Anne Lister, got me interested, and it happened last year in March 2020, on the eve of a pandemic. I took that flight and thought to myself, this is it, I'm going to the archives. And I had a wonderful time. I'm looking forward to go back to more archives and libraries, and I don't think this is going to stop anytime soon.
So I guess I'll go next. So my route into this whole rabbit warren of research started by just planning out a timeline. Just because I found that I read all of the books about Anne Lister, and I found that there was just so much information to digest. It was incredibly difficult to think about her life chronologically without visualizing it on the page or written out in some way. And I came across these really cool tools that would allow you to do it digitally, so you could see the timeline, and that basically opened up a whole world of research that I never really was interested in before. I don't have an academic background. I don't have a university background at all. So for me, it was just, I was interested. I read the books, and that interest only grew the more I read about Anne Lister, and I just wanted to uncover more. And the fact that there was, the diary transcription project has started, but there was only snippets and bits and pieces of information that were just coming out, and I just thought, no, I need to understand more of this woman and her life. And that then developed into not only Anne Lister, but the women and the people around her as well. Because I think to understand her, you really do need to understand the context of her life, and that involves, the places that she went, she travelled, she saw, and the people that she interacted with. So it started with a very tiny thread of building a timeline, and I pulled that thread, and a whole world opened up. And this is my life now. I'm 100% in this, and I don't think I'll ever be able to escape.
Thank you. Pauline.
Well, I'm just, I've never done research before. Marlene contacted me in November 2019 about this inventory for the Paris apartment. And she said, do you think you can take pictures? And I was like, okay, but I had no idea how to do that. And it took me a few weeks to go there because at the end of 2019, there was a huge strike in Paris, and the archives were closed. And so that's how I started to do research about Anne. And then I just realized that she has spent a lot of time in France, and she lived for a few years in Paris. So that's, I guess, what is the most interesting to me, like a life in France and travel also.
Brilliant. Jude, you're the person that I see the most, because when the library's been open for all 7 weeks or whatever we've had this year, you've been in there every week looking up stuff, haven't you, in the library and the archives?
Took advantage in between lockdowns. I took advantage of it being open and being able to book 2-hour slots. So it made me appreciate as well that what a fantastic place it is to find things and research stuff. I'd done a little bit of research before, because I was into family history on Ancestry, and also I'd done some research into an old house. There's a present which was in the Northgate Library. So I've not particularly used the library very much, but I did have an interest before Gentleman Jack came out in local history, but it was kind of a vague interest, even though I'm not from this area. I'm over the Pennines near Blackpool, but I've had connections here in Halifax for quite a lot of years, and I moved here about seven years ago. So once I started looking into Anne Lister, which was pretty much as soon as Gentleman Jack started, really. I was aware of Anne Lister beforehand, but hadn't particularly delved into that big sea of research, which is what it seems to be. So I've started going to the archive, booking days off work so that I could go in. The days that they can offer usually aren't every day of the week, so I managed to book some odd days, and it's just great being able to look at the actual original documents and letters, and even though the handwriting can be terrible, I basically take my camera and look at it properly afterwards. So I've been able to access the local archive and obviously the library, I've recently found microfilms, so I started looking at the diary for Caroline Walker, which has got some mentions of Anne Lister, not very many, but also the connections with the Walker family. I've also discovered that you can look at some of the letters on the microfilm, which is great. So that's my next plan. But I think, like other people, I've also started a collection of my own of Halifax books. So looking at the context of Anne Lister, the books of the history of the Halifax, and I've just acquired the one about the coiners, which has got things in about the history of Halifax. We also found, because of the church project, a book about the memorials, which is I think probably a few of us have now got copies of that. So we've started our own libraries, really. But yeah, there's a fantastic collection of things. These open up and let's get back in there.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that interested me with Pat with Potential. So we talk quite a lot about going down rabbit holes and Anne holes, and it seems like you've all started off researching Anne Lister and gone off in all sorts of wild directions and got really interested in different things. I wonder if there's something that's sort of like particularly grabbed you, that's got you interested in, that you wouldn't have even thought about before, like maybe like heraldry or graves or something like that.
Oh my God, I've done so much architecture. It's insane. Well, I always liked architecture, but from a very casual point of view. I like to visit buildings and cities and see how they are built. The intricacies in the design and how the building itself is a work of art. But I never expected to have such a large collection of church plans of all sorts, and having, I don't know, I've been to Shildon and I don't think I have as many photos of details in the building as I have from a church. So this is something I did not expect. The funny part is that I'm not a religious person. I enjoyed the art, I enjoyed the architecture, and I totally respect the people, of course, and the institution of religion itself, but it's not something I practice. But now I've amassed such an amount of knowledge about architecture and church in general that I honestly don't know what to do with it half of the time. But it served me in the sense that the church was in some ways a gateway for local history in Halifax, because I had to read books that told me how the church came to be and how the town grew up around it, and that exceeds Anne Lister in the sense that most of that detail precedes Anne Lister by centuries. So we had, at the time I was reading it, some things were not super connected to me, but now I'm reading the journals and I know how these families came up to be so important in town. I've gone to the point in which I know which roads she's traveling on, which buildings she's seeing, because she says on occasion where she is. And if you have an idea of how the town was in her time, and it doesn't need to be sometimes a very detailed idea, it's just a superficial one already helps, because you know where she is, what she's doing, with whom she's talking, and that brings that context, brings the journals to life in a way that just reading them out or with the little context that she provides, because she obviously knows the town and the people, reading that with that additional context brings everything else to life in a much more complete way, and it adds obviously value to the work of reading and understanding the woman and their times.
Sorry about that. My computer just decided to try and open up loads of windows randomly. Did anyone else want to say anything about that? About strange things they've researched that they thought they never would research?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up writing a whole article about mountaineering and Anne's mountaineering adventures, which is something I suppose I would have like a passing interest because it's quite an achievement to climb a mountain, but I never thought that I would be now reading books about other women who have climbed mountains and being like just in awe. It's not something I ever predicted, but it's actually incredible to think that women were climbing mountains back then in the 19th century in full corsets and skirts, and that's just insane. It's insane to me. I couldn't climb a mountain now, never mind back then in a corset, so it just blows my mind that I never ever would have guessed that I would have been interested in it, never mind written an actual article about it. So yeah, she can take you all over the place. It's incredible.
My current research sort of project, or anhole if you like, is looking at asylums in York. So in order to get the context of where people were living at the time, you know, Eliza obviously was in private asylums, but the small references in the journals and also, you know, in letters to try and sort of piece together whereabouts she was. But in order to understand the context, I think Marlene's done a lot of research as well about asylums and the legal system at the time as well, about the commissioners or committee rather for the lunatic, if you like, which isn't a very nice phrase, but it's how it was at the time. So yeah, that's kind of you know, interesting. I've got a particular interest, obviously, in places that are still around. Unfortunately, a lot of the town centre is probably Victorian rather than you know, Anne Lister's early 1800s time. There's not many surviving buildings really, but it is interesting to be able to, you know, have the perspective of being able to know where the places are that are mentioned. That's you know, obviously helped with my interest, being able to locate things on a map in my head, and also to go to the library, for instance, and look at the maps there, the Myers map, if anybody can get to the library at some point in the future. I'd recommend having a look at that. It's just a fantastic piece of art, basically. But it gives a lot of context as to if you're used to the words and the places from the journals, you'll you know, be able to see that in where they are in relation to Shibden Hall and Halifax. So yeah. Asylums is my recent project.
Thank you. I think one thing that really interested me with Pattern Potential is how collaborative all the projects are and all the collaborative tools that you've used. So, I mean, things like the trackers where people have pulled out different pieces of information, like books that she's interested in or food and all sorts of things like that. Does someone want to tell me a little bit about the trackers and how that came about?
Marlene, go for it. How did the trackers start?
Okay, so it's kind of a funny story. The idea is not mine. I cannot claim ownership on that one. That was Livia Labatte's idea. At some point, we started to talk, and she said, "Oh, it would be very cool to have a list of all the books Anne Lister read," and that started the bookshelf, which is basically as much a big list of books Anne Lister read. And recently we added the reviews because she sometimes comments on the book she's reading to say if it's good or not. But now we've used it in another research project to compare the books she had in Paris with the ones she had elsewhere, or if she had read them. And the Paris inventory has a section about books, and we managed to cross-reference. It's still a bit of an ongoing work, but we've cross-referenced quite a bit. So that's one obvious advantage. We also have a lot of other trackers. Some are more connected to stuff like clothes, which would help if some researcher would want to check what a person wore in Anne Lister's time. We have the Anne Walker sketchbook, which is a list of Anne's sketches. Basically, we don't know if any survive, but the idea is to provide a means of comparison in case some work emerges in the future attributed to her, because Anne Lister usually says where they are, what she's sketching. But we have all sorts of things from trackers for food, as you said. We have the letter bag, which is to track correspondence, because not everything survives. So we can now cross-reference what we know exists with what Anne Lister wrote about it. We have the dictionary, which is a recent launch, to track the odd and less common words Anne Lister uses. It's a good resource for code breakers and non-code breakers alike. And we have one for religion, to track Anne Lister's comments about religion. We have the travel reviews, which started in a very funny way. We sort of created a TripAdvisor profile for Anne Lister and promptly we did not get banned, but our reviews were deleted because they thought we were joking. We were just using Anne's reviews, but in a very ethical way, because we only reviewed monuments, not restaurants and stuff. That provided us with a funny, well, it starts in a funny way, but now it's a very good way to know where she went and what she thought of the places. But well, the sky is the limit. When we started, we did not expect this to blow up like this. So anyway, we hope it's useful. It has been useful to us in many ways, but the purpose of those trackers is to provide researchers with a way to get quick references for what they need, and then they can branch out and dig into the journal to see the broader context and to understand why she wrote what she wrote and when.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, even if you're not doing research, I think they're just really fascinating to just look at, to just see like what she has to say about different things.
Yeah, I think it's important to also say that some of the suggestions that we had from trackers came from outside of Packed with Potential. They were just suggested by people who are involved with different aspects of research, and they just suggested it to us. And absolutely, we're totally open to collaborating with as many people as possible. So if you've got good ideas, bring them on down.
Yeah, I do really like the collaborative element of it. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about, so the other thing as well as trackers and timelines and so on, is you've done some longer pieces of research and written articles. So there's the Paris Apartments, and there's also the Amanda's Mountaineering piece that just came out this week. And then also the part about where is Anne Lister buried in the Minster. So shall we have a little talk about the Minster, and then we'll have a chat about the Paris Apartments?
Okay,
So do you want to tell me, how did that start?
This is a recurring problem, so to speak. It's a recurring research problem, because the question always comes up. Anne Lister is buried in the Minster, as much as we know, and there are sources who prove that, namely newspapers and the burial records. But the question is, where exactly in the Minster is she? Because we know she's there, but we don't really know where exactly she is, which brings a few constraints to work on. First of all, this comes and goes often. We first thought about stuff like fact checks, but we did not jump into it until maybe after the summit, perhaps slightly before that, but not. It has gone on for a while, but not that long. So we started to do the usual data gathering, first with books, archival references. Of course, there was that element of getting the context from the church. I mean, from church in the sense that the history of the church, because the building changes around their grave, obviously. And this is a highly collaborative project because we need to be able to read many sources in parallel, compare notes, and sometimes we have to get ourselves into endeavors that are not entirely reasonable, like taking E.W. Crossley's book and mapping out every single inscription based on location he observed in 1909. That provided a good context for what we were looking at. It also means going back to Anne Lister's journals and read the funerals she attended or knew of, and understanding where exactly those graves were, even though we know that other researchers had already read them, but sometimes it pays off, and in this case it really paid off, to go with a fresh pair of eyes. So basically, it's a lot of data gathering at first, and it's sometimes as we move on, it continues. But the first steps were just figuring out where we need to go first. First, understand the building, then get the team. Obviously, we have the team, but get someone on the team looking at different aspects so we can compare archaeology, history from Anne Lister's journals, the gravestones and the inscriptions, all that sort of stuff. And then we need to get everything in the same space, discuss it, and figure out where things, well, match. And at some point, we started to look at plans in the data gathering, because it's important to know how the church changes. So plans are the best way to look at the building changing over time, because every time, or almost every time, you make changes, you should have a plan if the changes are very, very large, which happened in 1878. But then we wanted to go back and see a plan from Anne's time. And we came across a plan that was allegedly given to her, but it was actually a copy of the original, which was given to her. And she said in July 1835 that she had bought a plan of the old church, which is today known as the Halifax Minster. She was bought a plan of the church from the sexton, and we are still not sure why exactly she bought it, even though we went back in time to try to find a reference in which she says, I bought this for this purpose. Right now, we think she bought it either for to handle the tenancies of the pews she owned inside the church, because her pews are marked in those plans, marked in her handwriting, which is the interesting part. But then we came across one thing that was even more strange and we did not expect, which was the markings of graves on that plan. And the first plan we got, which was from 1836, was a copy of that original one from 1835. Or at least we think it's a copy, because as far as we know, there are only two, and the second one mentions the first. So the 1836 one had only the graves marked. There are Lister graves and Walker graves. The 1835 one has the same graves marked in the same locations, with the correction that was then updated on the 1836 one. But it has also a feature that we managed to cross-reference with the journals, which is the names of the people buried in a cluster of graves in the south aisle of the church. Until then, until we started to work on this, we thought, as many others thought before us, that the Lister Vault, as it is often called, was in the Oldsworth Chapel, because Anne Lister wrote when her uncle was buried that the burial family burial place was in the South Chapel near the Constable's Pew. But when we started to look at those earlier plans, it happens that the constable's pew is not necessarily where she hinted it was. So then we went back to the other funerals, particularly Jeremy Lister's funeral, and there's a part in which she says that the vicar is performing the ceremony standing on a pew. You only stand on a pew if you don't have space to stand on an aisle or an open space. So we looked at that. At first, we only had the 1836 plan. And we theorized that Jeremy Lister's grave would be on that cluster because there are no Lister graves inside the Old Wars Chapel. The closest that was marked on those plans is on the outside of the church. Who is buried there? We don't know, but it has an L, so at least one Lister or a part of that grave belongs to Listers should be there. But then when Jude went to the archive, we told her, hey, Jude, we are interested in this sort of thing. And Jude came across a brilliant thing, which was the other plan, which we are thinking is the 1835 plan, the original one, and Lister bought from the sexton, which is proven by the journal that she did indeed buy that. And that one had very faint pencil markings, and we went all geek on this and put that in a photo editing software. And that one had the names of the people buried in those graves, and they matched what we had from the journals. So right now, well, obviously nobody can dig because you cannot disturb the archaeology in church floors, and you cannot destroy a floor just because you want to confirm who is below ground. We think with a very good degree of confidence that James Lister, Aunt Anne, Joseph Lister and his wife, and Jeremy Lister are all buried in the south aisle in a location consistent with what Anne Lister described, but instead of writing South Aisle, she wrote South Chapel, which could be due to a number of things. Maybe she was trying to talk about a general direction. Maybe she made a mistake because she was grieving her uncle. Anything is possible, but the fact is the plans and the other funerals prove that location. But then we come back to the other problem, which is where exactly she is. And that one we are still working on. It's a very collaborative thing. Sometimes we hit, roadblocks and things get difficult, but we'll get there. The main aspect of this is to do so with as much information as possible, because obviously nobody can dig. So, and the church changed a lot, and the floors of the church changed a lot over the centuries. So, what's true at surface level now is not necessarily what was true at surface level back then when she was buried. So it takes a lot of effort and a lot of people to look at several things, sometimes even at the same thing with different knowledge, so we can cross-reference options and see what if we are going in a reasonable direction. But well, the fact is, nobody knows yet where she is. So eventually, someone might get there, and if our work contributes to that, awesome. But basically, this is not done to claim anything. This is just a curiosity that went wildly out of the bounds that we had set at first. And well, if at least we've contributed to something that is bigger than us, and it gives to the community, both the locals and the overall community. And in the end, it's a good thing. I mean, she's there somewhere. So if you can narrow it down and provide options, so in the future, if the option to dig becomes available, people can do so and understand the constraints of that work and maybe find her. I mean, for me, it's mostly closure, but I would like to know where exactly she is, because this has been going on for some time, but we're not doing this for any sort of thing other than curiosity and, well, an interest in Anne Lister as a person.
I think the other thing you've done is inadvertently like created some really great resources for people that are just doing family history, like with the whole mapping and stuff. People could kind of find where their relatives might be as well as Anne Lister. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, Amanda, would you like to go into detail about the gravestones?
Yeah, so Marlene and I spent, I don't know, a couple of hours very late one evening transcribing all of the gravestones and the memorials and inscriptions from Crossley's book. But it turned out to be fundamental, really, in understanding what he saw and the structure of the stones. And yeah, figuring out where the Lister vault was in the end. It was absolutely fundamental. So it was worth the time. And it's still useful now. Even that book is absolute gold dust. And I think you have to shout out those historians and antiquarians from Halifax, because they really knew what they were doing. And it may not be that their work has been recognised fully, but it was absolutely important and essential that they did the work that they did, because we wouldn't have been able to do any of what we have done without going back to read those books. And it comes back to using the library, using the resources that are there publicly in the community to fully understand the history and the context of a place. We would have had our hands tied behind our back if it wasn't for that work.
Yeah, you've read a lot of history books, haven't you, about Halifax? I remember, I think Marlene was like, "Oh, I've read Hanson's and I've just bought Watson's and Crabtree's," and I was like, "Gosh, that's quite full on."
Yeah. I got a first edition of Crossley's with the funny, shocking detail that it once belonged to the Yorkshire Archaeological Society. So that was a fun one. But I did so one night. I was browsing for more books because we needed more references, and Amanda casually said, "We should get Crossley's book because it has been so important. So we should really each get a copy because the man's work helped us so much." So I thought, okay, fine. One day I was looking for more references and I came across this very discreet thing that said E.W. Crossley's monumental inscriptions at the Halifax Parish Church. And I'm like, okay. So I got that one. And then, well, it's one of my prized possessions right now. But then I got a very old one too from, I think it's the first edition from 1836 of Crabtree's History of Halifax. I think we might have a digital version of Watson's or something of the sort. We have a lot of books in both digital and physical formats, which we consult as we go. We also compiled a sizable collection of transactions of the Halifax Antiquarian Society. And I've got also T.W. Anson's book, The History of Old Halifax, which is a book that it says is written for the children of Halifax to give them a context of the history of the town. But to me, it served as a broad context to a town I did not understand very well at the time. And I think I have also a more modern one from Hargreaves, but that one is more for specific details, so I use it as reference. But yes, definitely. There are some books we would recommend, I'm sure. Personally, I would say The History of Old Halifax is very useful if you are into Anne Lister and even if you are not into Anne Lister. But as Amanda said before, we stand in the shoulders of giants because those researchers from Halifax, this happens almost every week. Almost every week we say these people are not recognized enough because they did such stellar work, and sometimes it's people usually are more aware of John Lister, and of course he was a brilliant historian and he did a brilliant work during his lifetime. But there are others contemporary to him who also published. Maybe this is a funny part about John Lister. He is so acknowledged, but he did not publish a book. He published a series of transactions in the Halifax Antiquarian Society. Obviously, he was the president of the society, And yes, stellar work. But personally, I would say that Crossley, Hanson, Savage, Breton, all those men, I'm not aware of many women back then wrote. If they did, it was under a pseudonym, so they had a man's name. But the work of those men were not often known in both the enlisted community and at large. Maybe locally it's different, but their work helped us immensely in many ways. Breton has helped in a project about heraldry. The person working on that for Pact with Potential needed more resources. And at the time we were looking at Breton's work for the church project. So we forwarded that reference so they could look at the information about the coats of arms in the ceiling, because the listed coat of arms is one of them. But both the work that is already published and work from modern historians like David Glover, well, it helps immensely, especially if you are looking at the town from an outsider's perspective and you don't always have access to everything at the ideal time. So you have to build up that knowledge, and the books and the articles and sometimes discussing ideas with specific people helps a lot.
That's great. It makes me really excited that you're all getting really interested in Halifax and Calderdale's history as well. Like it's nice that it, yeah, I guess, yeah, sort of proves that idea of it being a gateway to sort of different types of research and taking you off in different directions. But of course, Anne Lister lived in Halifax, but she also travelled around a lot. And a lot of you've done a lot of work around her travels as well. And Pauline in particular, because you're based in France, you were able to go and do some research into the apartment that Anne Lister stayed at for about, she had it for about 10 years or something, didn't she, this apartment in Paris? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how you got about it and what you found out?
Yes, so Marlene contacted me, and she had found the reference for that inventory of an apartment in Paris. It's held at the National Archives in Paris, and so I'm based near Paris. So I went there and I just took pictures, and then I transcribed the whole thing. And after that, we wanted to have the full pictures. So I went back to the journals to find out when did Anne start renting that apartment. And well, we found that she actually had 2 different apartments in Paris. One for students when she had the dissection lesson, and then she moved her stuff at some point in correct me, Marlene, 1831, I think.
Sorry, which one of them?
When she moved from number 7 to number 27.
I'm very bad with dates, but maybe
I think it was
1929, 1829, 1830, sometime around that.
Yeah. I think she moved in 1831. So yes, she had the apartment for almost 10 years, yes.
Do you want to tell me some of the things you found on the inventory? I think the thing that stood out for me was the skeleton.
Yeah.
Like, where did that come from?
Yes, she had a skeleton for studies about anatomy, and well, I guess it just stayed there in Paris in her apartment. So yeah, it's a famous item. I'm actually reading journals from 18 1829 to 1831, and that skeleton is quite famous, I think. So yes, she had a very big collection of books. We don't know exactly how many books because the inventory is not it's not very detailed. But Anne in 1831 made an inventory of her books in Paris, and it's very detailed. It's Anne, so you know. And recently I read, I think it was in December 1830 or something, she says that she has 800 books in Paris. So I don't know, I still have to work on this because the list is massive, but we don't know yet what happened to the thing they found in the apartment. We're still working on it. I had to put this on hold, but you know, it's still in my mind, like, but what happened to all of this? Because especially the book, I guess, and well, maybe the skeleton, but I don't think we can find it now.
And
yeah. But the books could be, I don't know, maybe they are still in Paris. We kind of hope so, I guess. And so, yes, we also try to find out if the building is still there in Paris. So we looked at many maps of Paris from different years to compare. It's hard to tell, but I think we have a good idea of which building it could be today. We just don't have the confirmation that it's still that building, because Paris changed a lot after Einziger, and it's kind of hard to tell if this is which one is exactly, or could be exactly the building where she had her apartment. But it's also something that I'm hoping to find out one day, but there is so much research to do that at some point you have to just put it on hold, and maybe one day I will have a new idea, like, oh, maybe we should look there. Or, you know, I'm not a researcher, so I have no idea what I'm doing. So, but I think we found very interesting stuff about that apartment.
Definitely, I think it gives you quite a good idea about, because I think one thing that struck me was like all the furniture and things that she had in it. Like it was packed full of stuff, wasn't it? But it just gave you a really good idea about what her life might have been like whilst she was living in Paris, because she was only there for like fairly short periods of time, wasn't she? But yet she brought all this stuff, and it just makes you think, gosh, maybe she was just a hoarder, like, and just liked going shopping or something. You never know.
Yeah, but mostly the books, she's like, in between 1829 and 1831, she just, I don't know, she just bought all of these books. Like, okay, but do you have time to read them? You know, she's like, she's going to auctions to buy books. I'm like, okay. And she ends up with, yeah, she say 800 books. So it's a massive collection. And yeah, I don't know, we don't know yet how many books she had there, but I think the inventory she made in 1831 is already a good clue.
Oh, so as a side note, she sometimes kept the journals, travel journals or otherwise, there in sometime in 1837, I think. I might be wrong on the year, but she's really a bit worried that she might have lost her travel journals from France in the 1830s. And those happened to be in Paris. So when she went back, they were there. And at some point, she also talks about a certain volume from her main journal that she needed in connection to trouble of Eliza Rain to double check a reference. And it was in Paris. She tells the people she's talking to that that journal used to be in Paris, and she brought it back. So at some point, given what she says, it's possible she kept some of the journals in Paris and then brought them all back when she returned to Shibden in 1838.
Yeah, there's so much more research to do, isn't there? I think it's never going to end. In terms of travels, Amanda, do you want to tell us a little bit about the piece of research that you've just finished and published about her mountaineering? Just give us a little introduction about what you've been doing with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I first heard about Anne Lister, one of the things that really struck me was that she climbed Mount Vignomale, and I just thought, that's crazy. How? Why would you do that? So yeah, I read all the books, and I started to realize that she didn't just climb Mount Vignomale. She climbed a lot. You know, she loved doing it. And so throughout some of the transcription batches that I was doing, I had her climbing Ben Nevis as well, and I just sort of, they were starting to tot up and add up, and Marlene was discovering that she had attempted to climb Mount Ararat, and probably would have done so if not for an earthquake that year. I think that's 1839. Is that right?
1840.
1840, yeah. And Ararat is massive, but I mean, she had the ambition to do it, and I've no doubt that she would have done it if not for the earthquake. But yeah, so they're starting to sort of collect over a couple of months, and I just had the idea of, gosh, wow, I mean, this is quite substantial. She must have been some athlete to be able to do that. So I decided to sort of bring them all together. So a lot of us within the community had already transcribed quite a lot of them, so I just asked around and said, you know, can I have your transcripts to sort of build this collection, and did a little bit of research into all of them. And I think in total, within the article, I can't remember how many we have, but it's in the teens, you know. And it's not just mountains, you know, hikes and very long, arduous hikes through crazy weather. And she just loved being outdoors, and it really shows. It's quite something. So yeah, I just decided to put them all together for myself, just to put it together and see what it would look like. And I mean, it's fairly substantial, really. What a legacy.
People can have a look at that, along with all the other projects on the Patch with Potential website. One thing I just wanted to ask you about, because you've done so much research in the last year where you've basically all been at home, and like, apart from the odd trip to a graveyard or whatever, most of it has been online. So I'm just wondering, what's next once we're all released and we can go out in the world and start going to libraries and archives and traveling a bit? Like, have you got a list of places you want to go and visit and research you want to do for things in the future?
Yes. Archives again. Like a lot of them. And maybe the Pyrenees, because I've been, at the time I transcribed those pages, I spent some time learning more about the communities in the Pyrenees and how things were. But yeah, the Pyrenees, but probably first Halifax for some, I like to say relaxing, but I just know myself, and it will be a trip for libraries and archives all around. So yeah, it will be a mix of fun and research.
I haven't actually set foot in an archive yet, and now I have probably 3 that I want to go to as soon as I'm allowed.
Have you got some particular projects on the go that are like, yeah, that we need to keep an eye out for?
Well, we usually don't talk about unpublished material, but look out for updates of all stuff that's already there.
Yeah.
And yeah, but something might come up eventually, either new timelines or maps, since it's a very collaborative thing, sometimes projects grow and expand very quickly. So someone might pitch us some ideas, and if anyone wants to pitch us an idea for an article or as a contribution they wish to make, please get in touch, and we'll get things going with you. So, anything is possible.
And a lot of the trackers and things are like, you can ask for access for it, can't you? So if you're doing a bit of transcription, either involved with West Yorkshire Archives or not, and you come across a book that's not been recorded on there, you can ask for access so you can add it on or contact you, can't you?
Yeah, not just code breakers. This is the point we wish to make. If you are reading a transcription blog and you find something that we don't have in the tracker and you wish to contribute, please ask for access. Each tracker has instructions, a few fields that you must provide, but overall, anyone, codebreaker or not, can contribute. When you say it's open to everyone, it's really open to everyone. As long as you provide the references and fill the fields we ask, it's all fine.
Brilliant, thank you. The other thing I wanted to just mention is the other thing you did was the Anne Lister Research Summit. Do you want to just tell me very quickly, like, how that was? How did that come about? You're just like, we're just going to do a conference.
Go ahead, Amanda. Explain this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, this was sort of Livia Labate's baby, really. She had the idea of sort of bringing a lot of this research that's going on in different areas, not just with Pact with Potential, but all the research that's going on into Anne Walker and all these different things, just bringing them together and sort of opening the community up, really, to sort of share information. And so the summit was born, the Anne Lister Research Summit, which we did last September. And yeah, it was fantastic. It was 3 days, and it was packed with all sorts of different things, covering different topics within the Anne Lister research community. We had a session with West Yorkshire Archives where they brought the diaries and they talked about the diary transcription project. And we had some transcribers to talk about the work that they've been doing. We had sessions on absolutely everything, and the summit website is still up. You can still go. All the content from the whole weekend is available to watch as videos. So if you missed out, absolutely hit that website and go and check it all out. It's all there for you to binge in one go. I don't recommend binging it in one go. There's a lot there to digest. But it's all there to go through and pick through, and it's fantastic. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, and thank you so much for joining us. So yeah, people want to have a look at the Anne Lister Research Summit and also Pact with Potential and have a look. You could spend like days looking through all the fantastic research that's been done on there, but I'll put links and stuff to it along with this video. So I just want to say thank you all for joining us, and hopefully I'll see you at some point in real life in Halifax. That would be nice.
We'll meet you in the library.
Yeah.